Okay, now it's time to write a more useful script. What we're going to write is, I'm going to call it an archiving script. What this script will do is take a single argument, which is the file path for a file or a directory, so a location. It's going to take whatever is in that location and copy it to a predetermined location that we're going to hard program, essentially. Let's get started. In the chapter 3 directory, once again, I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to call this Archie, short for archive. I won't call it arc because there's already a command called arch, and that has to do with the architecture of the processor that we're using. So I'm going to call it Archie, if I can spell it correctly. There we go. So there's our new empty script. And of course, once again, the hash bang line. And we'll leave a comment to tell us what this script is doing. Archive the input file to a predetermined location. Okay, so this is going to make use of a couple of things that we've already seen, arguments and variables. So we can set up a variable for where we want this file, this archive, to be maintained. So what we can do is just put in a comment to tell us what it is, the archive location, and I'm going to create a variable called archive. That makes sense. Now I can set this variable to a file path just by entering a file path. So here I'm going to enter /home/pi archives. That means in our home directory, we're going to have an archives directory. That's fine. Note that I have used the absolute reference here, the absolute file path. This is really important to do with this kind of script especially, and we'll come to that later, but just know that there's a reason why we're using the absolute file path. I wouldn't use, for instance, the tilde character as a shortcut. That's not going to work for us down the track. Now, we've got the archive location that we've just set as kind of like a user-programmed variable. It's kind of like hard-coded. Now, what we can do is make the destination if it doesn't already exist. So we're going to make the archive. And we do that, of course, with our make directory, and we can access the variable archive. Now this would normally work, but of course if we already have the directory there, we don't want to throw any errors or have any funny business. So we can use an option for make directory, which is -p. And that is going to, well, first of all, if we specify a very long file path with lots of folders that don't actually exist yet, it will create these parent directories along the way until it gets to the end one. So that p will make the entire file path and create all directories if they don't yet exist. But it will also elegantly handle if the directory already exists. So we can run that every time, and it'll only create the directory on the first run. So that's fine. Now we can copy the input file. So remember, we're taking in an argument, which is a location. We're going to copy the input file, and this uses a command called cp for copy. So we're going to copy, we're going to access the first argument, and we're going to put it in archive. So this is that's the syntax for the copy command. It copies from and to. So we're copying from whatever we input, and we're copying it to archive. And of course, we are accessing the variable archive that we created up here. So as we change this, it'll change the behavior of the script, which is nice and convenient. Now, there's one other thing, again, another option that we have to include, which is the -r, and that stands for recursive. So copy is usually reserved for copying files, but if we put in a -r as an option, this recursive copy looks inside subdirectories and copies their contents, then copies the parent directory. So if that doesn't make sense, just bear in mind that -r is for copying everything inside a directory. So a directory and subdirectories. Now, this is fine just as it is, but we can include a bit of a safety mechanism perhaps, which is actually checking if an argument was even entered. We could run our archive script Archie, and without an input, it would run and probably some errors would happen. So we want it to handle this gracefully. And we can do that by checking that we got exactly one argument passed in. So I'm going to do that right at the top here, because that should happen first. And I'm going to put in a comment saying, check for exactly one argument. And we're going to use the same logic that we did in the previous section. We're going to say if, and we can access that number of arguments, which is $hash, and then we can say is not equal to 1. So this is true if we ever receive a number of arguments that is not 1, which means there's an error. So we can say then echo, and we can kind of prompt the user with a helpful bit of feedback on how to use the program. So we can say echo usage, and we can access the name of the command, which is the $0 or the 0th argument, and we can say usage, that argument, and file. So this is going to prompt the user or give them a hint as to how to use the program correctly. And then we're going to do something called exiting. So this is going to exit our program, and the 1 is going to indicate an error. And I'll just come back to it. I'll finish the if statement. So this if statement is checking if it's received the correct number of, or rather checking if it's not received the correct number of arguments. If it hasn't received the correct number of arguments, it issues an exit 1. Now exit 1 means an error, or in fact, exit anything other than 0 means an error. Exit 0 is the only condition that feeds back to the shell and says, hey, yeah, this program ran just fine. This is going to exit the program immediately and not run any of our other code, which would be maybe a problem because we didn't actually have the right number of arguments. So this should be ready to run now. So I'm going to save this with Control S. And I'm already in my chapter 3 directory, so I can just say chmod u plus x, and the script was called Archie. So we can lsl, and everything looks in order there. So I'm going to just bring this over, and I'm going to open another window. So here's my home directory, and when I run this Archie script, we should see the archive directory being created. But I have to actually tell the script what to back up. So I'm just going to choose the chapter 2 directory here, which has a few Python scripts from chapter 2. So yeah, I'd like to back that up. Let's use the Archie script to back that up. So that is going to be .dash, because we're already in the chapter 3 directory, Archie. And I'm going to back up the chapter 2. So the way I can do that is to say /home/pi/chapter2. So we're backing up the entire directory and whatever's inside it. Now when I strike enter, we've just seen this archives directory appear, and if we go inside it, we've got a copy of chapter 2, and inside that are all the scripts that we are interested in backing up. So that is a very basic way to automate otherwise maybe a bit more of a tedious task like archiving. We're going to expand this in the next video, so we're going to create a copy and just expand its functionality to make it a little bit more interesting.